Hey guys, can you hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you. We'll get started in a sec here. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is going to be a kind of more structured meeting than we've had in the past. But really, the only two items on today's agenda are first to kind of talk about some research that Checkmate and I have been doing. So I'm going to attach a document in here in a sec. Just kind of going over every weekend we do an analysis for premium members. And let me know if I'm cutting out because it does look like I'm getting some poor reception here. But that document I just sent is regarding Florian coin, which, as we've kind of been talking about in the chat, is linked to T0 and what they're building off of. We find that to be very interesting because T0 is obviously pumped itself up to be one of the top, if not the top, crypto exchanges. Overstock.com has been betting big on them. They've and it's very surprising for us to find that they're built off of what is essentially an old coin that has some questionable aspects about it. And as you'll see by reading the document, there's just some pieces that seem to be missing, and we're still kind of doing some journalism of our own to try and determine, why would stock and T0 use no one's really been using. So far as we can tell, it's not a dead coin, but it certainly is. When you compare it to a network like Ethereum, there's a lot of questions in place of why not go with something bigger and better. And furthermore, let's see that they're using it because it's cheap, and I'm not quite buying that. I think they're in some sort of they have some sort of ulterior motive to drive this coin as they want to, or have their own basically private blockchain they can help steer the direction in. They also made some investment into Ravencoin last year, and so I've been looking into that as well because they both use IPFS, so that means they're naturally atomic swappable. Basically, they're very similar. Here's an article that kind of discusses that. Yeah, that also kind of piqued my curiosity because or they have steered the direction of Ravencoin. That's another one that we've been watching a lot, and does that mean that they're going to get more involved in that, or are they eventually going to switch over to that? Does that relate to the fact that their T0 coin, the ICO, was issued as an ERC20 Ethereum token? A lot of questions here, and something that I find very interesting. So, Checkmate's done a great job of kind of compiling some of our research on that. Essentially, why we're asking all these questions and why I'm bringing all this up is because we need to have the ability to do our own investigative journalism into what we're starting to get invested in and interested in. And this is a critical skill that we have to continue to look at, and aim to develop. Oh, that link I posted is broken. I'm sorry about that. Here we go. Post it again. Cool. But yeah, I think this is really a good start into asking some of these deeper questions with related to what it is we're looking at. And it's certainly with something as big as T0, really not just taking them at face value. I think that was one of the big issues I had with ICO investors and people during the ICO boom. And if you're guilty, don't feel too bad. But I think a lot of people got persuaded by a white paper and a flashy website, and it's if that's kind of the standard or the status quo, then it kind of leads to some problems down the road, as we found out. So I'm not saying that T0 is doing anything bad here. I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad position for them to be in, to be developing on and launching off of an old coin that has been completely mined, basically. And I don't know. There's just a lot of questions, and they seem to be they seem to skate around why they're using this old token, and why they seem to want to move in this direction. Oh, it's choppy. Okay. Shoot. All right. I'll see if I can move closer to the router. um, but yeah, so that was the first thing I wanted to discuss today, and then the second piece was starting to move in a direction on our portfolio as well. So give me 2 minutes to relocate here, guys. I'm sorry about that. I'm kind of on the road today, so okay, and I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, what I was basically talking about here is just starting to develop a framework and move in a direction on the portfolio. So one thing I wanted to kind of open up to the room here is what we need to do in terms of splitting the allocations. And one thing I was talking about and starting to think about was how we would like to split this up between the three pillars of crypto, STO, and DeFi. But what does that actually look like, and how do we base that off of our sort of risk tolerances and our the direction we want to move in? Do we do a more heavy weighting towards crypto, or just STOs, or what? It's there's, I think, still a lot of questions in place, and it's something that I'm trying to develop in a meaningful manner. But yeah, it's also something I want us to own collectively. So this is definitely where I could use your help on this. So to that end, is there anything we should be looking at in terms of the portfolio metrics? And is there anything you think we should be specifically trying to base the portfolio off of? Should we, for example, weigh heavily into a little bit more risky coins, or should we just stick to the top 10? These are sort of the questions that we definitely have to kind of establish and say, like, okay, we're only going to be investing in the biggest cryptocurrencies. We're only going to be investing in what we deem to be the best STO projects, and we're going to be sticking to what are the most established or structured DeFi projects as well. There's a lot of questions in place, and it's not an easy thing to answer. But I know PBB is going to have an opinion on this, so I'm excited for this. Yeah, so that was kind of my feelings as well. Is that STOs are definitely an awesome opportunity, and it's definitely something to get very excited about. But at the same time, it's going to take some time for them to really develop themselves and to come to market. And at the very minimum, I think we're still a year away. So in that regard, I think they should represent the smallest of the three pillars for now. That can certainly change as the industry starts to develop itself. But realistically, we're looking at something like 10% of the portfolio for now, because I just think it's fun to get excited about, and it's fun to start to allocate a portion of the portfolio to right now. But at the same time, it needs to we need to respect the fact that it's a very nascent piece. It's a very nascent industry. So that said, as we were talking about last week, we will also want to be able to split each of these three pillars into their own respective portfolios. So if you wanted to, you could, just take the 10% of our total portfolio that is allocated directly to STOs, and if we have maybe 9 separate projects allocated in that, build an entire portfolio out of that. I think there's a lot of modular functions built into the nature of this portfolio. That's why I like it. It just needs to come together. And so, yeah, Cryptomaniac version 1 and version 2 of our portfolios, they're still out there. And, I think I'm going to set up a dedicated page just for them so people can see like what we got into in the past. But we should always be striving to build a better portfolio, and we should always be moving in a direction that respects the nature of the current market. So, when we built version 2, for example, of the portfolio, the intention was to try to beat the market, or at least just try to weather the bear market as best as possible. We did, I think, some of that, and it still is. I would say it's a pretty good portfolio, all things considered. But at the same time, I think the market and the overall industry is moving in this new direction that I think we just really want to capture. That's why we want to split it up between these different sectors, these different pillars, and also respect it. Do we, how do we, capture that, and how do we, look at those three pillars and say, okay, STOs 10%, exact, something like that. So yeah, as far as maintaining the old portfolios, I don't know if that's I don't know if that's in the playbook for right now. Just because you know it, I I think that they're good as they are right now, and you could certainly take for them what you will. But I think we should always be looking to move to something new, or try to move in a new direction. So yeah, I don't know. If you don't like that answer, definitely let me know, because ultimately I just want to give you guys the best. And certainly when it comes to a portfolio, it's it is not an easy thing to capture. It's definitely something that I constantly think about and constantly want to perfect and shape. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, like for example, version one, we I wouldn't say we discontinued it, but it just it was a really good portfolio for 2017. Sort of was okay for the first half of 2018, and then it was weighted too heavily to altcoins, so that's why we sort of pulled it back and said, okay, it's time for a new portfolio that better captures what the market's doing now. Um, and also, what we built V1, we had a lot of our entry points, and we would do stop losses, and people just weren't happy with that because they weren't able to follow us, or they would say, "Hey, I just found your portfolio, and you're 6 months into it, and obviously I can't capture the same buy points that you did. So this is not as useful to me as it probably is for you." So it is definitely something that I continue to try to think about. How can we make better, and how can we just make it more accessible for people? So as relates to Engine Coin PV, that's always been an interesting one. I'll admit, I would not buy it after a pump. I would not buy any coin after it's pumped. But and yeah, I wouldn't say it's a bad coin. I would love to see it pull back and be able to scoop some up. But yeah, it was the same thing with like Raven Coin a couple months ago. It's like, that's a cool coin. I want some of that. I'm gonna wait for it to come back to reality, and yeah, just give it some time. I swear, it's like you just have to wait for people to calm down about things. Um, just keep mental tabs of this, or even keep a Google Doc or something like that. Coins that do these sort of pumps, because you never want to chase pumps, but if they do have good fundamentals, then just keep an eye out for let's say I think Digitex is actually a really good example of that right now, because it pumped really hard and it came down, which was to be expected, and in no way was helped by Adam Todd's shenanigans. But that's neither here nor there. He's not a bad CEO. He's just eccentric. But yeah, it came down. But now that we're getting close to the launch, now that we have some meat on the bones, like we have something to work with. Now that we have a date in place that hopefully will not get delayed. Yeah, it's I think the it's starting to heat up again. So that was a very clear example of like, yep, it got way too hot, way too fast, came down, perfect buy point, and now we're gonna watch it probably do something similar, buy the rumor, sell the news kind of deal. I can't exactly foresee what's going to happen here, but I would say that it's probably going to lead up to April 30th and then sell off again. That's the most likely thing, but obviously this is the crypto space and anything can happen. But But yeah, Southpaw, you're exactly right. The DeFi space, I think, is heating up because has it is a very concentrated version of crypto. Where I say, crypto versus STO, they're really separate. DeFi, it does kind of live within the crypto space in that regard. It just, it is really exciting because it really takes sort of the spirit of this industry and concentrates it in a way that is, I think, going to be very useful for onboarding, for adoption, for just really proving the, the salient nature of this space. So I'm excited to continue to watch it, and we're definitely going to make it a much more prolific part of what we sort of are watching, what we want to talk about, because I think there's so much benefit. Like the fact that we can at this point in time replace retail banking with a series of online protocols. I think that's crazy. That's so cool. Um, so it's just something that gets me really excited. um, yeah, PB, I think we should. I would like to work with Doc on this one too, to also have some swing trading nature in place, or we've wanted to implement some sort of signal service for a while now, but we don't want to be doing that right at the bottom of a bear market. I think that's pretty obvious as to why. So we definitely want to be doing that sort of stuff. We just need the market to heat up again, so that we're not twiddling our thumbs and saying like, yeah, we'll get there eventually. There'll be some opportunities. No, it's starting to look cool. I'm really enjoying how the market's starting to do some of these like sporadic rallies that we just haven't seen for a while. It does really take me back to like early 2017, summer 2017 kind of stuff. It's kind of fun. So hopefully this can keep up. And even if we just have a short little bull rally, that would be fine. That would definitely, yeah. There's definitely some Bart Simpson going on right now. Fabian, yes and no. Definitely, we've watched it pump. So you do run the risk of buying something at the high, and so I would exercise a lot of caution if you're going to even like attempt to buy something like that. I would set the stop loss, you know, pretty conservative on that, so that you're not stuck holding a bag of buying at the all-time high. That's a very common issue people have in crypto, is they got in at the top and they didn't sell, and they're stuck holding bags. But at the same time, I think there could be a little bit of upside potential, but just be very, very, very cautious of the fact that this could be the all-time high, or the temporary high for that coin. So just again, I'm not telling you to buy or anything like that. I would just exercise caution. What we're doing right now, what Doc and I are doing, is we're just taking a little bit off the top of our big position. We're saying, okay, we're stair stepping some sell orders at the same time, putting in some buy orders below. It's kind of fun. I like doing that, because when you have an asset that is moving a lot, you can start to do stuff like that. So yeah, I would agree with you, PB. I'm bullish on those as well. People really gave me a lot of flack a week ago when I put out that video of the 10 or so projects I'm watching. I probably listed over 20 in that video, so it wasn't really an accurate title, but I just like using 10 because it's an easy number. So whatever. But yeah, I said, I'm watching BNB because of what they're doing with their decentralized exchange, in quotes. Like, it's not really a decentralized exchange, or there's caveats there, whatever. And people are mad that I didn't mention that, or that I was propping it up as some sort of like revolutionary DEX, when it's really not. It's just Binance doing Binance things, whatever. But like right after I put out that video, the coin started to pump, and I'm not I'm not saying that I forecasted that or anything like that. But geez, yeah, it is really shown that it is a strong contender, and I think part of the reason why is because they clearly get how to operate in this space. They clearly get that you need to stay nimble and, you know, accept and adopt the new directions of things, because if you're just, you know, a one trick pony, you're gonna get so disrupted so fast. It's not even funny. Like that's the nature of this space. So you have to like constantly stay on your feet. So am I saying Binance is like the perfect example of that? No, not exactly, but I think they're doing a good job. They definitely pioneered the model of the you know, exchange token that, you know, really gives you dividends in the fact that they do token burns, and you know, you get a lessened trading fee, so it was naturally very attractive to day traders, if not for the fact that they already had the number one liquidity or, you know, by volume exchange. You know, that's cool. I think they're doing cool stuff. I also think they're kind of shady, and you know, people are going to, you know, point fingers at them for doing stuff that they probably shouldn't be doing. But at the end of the day, they're a business, and you know, they really exist to capitalize on blockchain technology. They're not really okay. Yeah, they are kind of pushing the envelope in some respects, but I don't know. It you can go back and forth on it. So whatever. And yes, the YouTube comments can be brutal at times. But yeah, I don't know. So yeah, that's a good point. PVEs. Just the nature of decentralization is sort of it's a contentious thing. It's really hard to seek and grasp. You know, decentralization, full decentralization, is a privilege. It's very hard to attain. It's very hard to maintain. And yeah, you will have centralized entities or, you know, hybrid solutions, I think, for a while. I think that's going to be the norm, and I don't think I see enough people kind of addressing that or accepting it. Is the fact that, you know, pushing for decentralization is great, but expecting full decentralization, expecting even coins within the top 10 to be fully decentralized, I think is kind of a pipe dream for right now. But we are on the right track, and that's important. So, oh, cool. That's awesome. You got a masternode. I've met a couple of members of the Swarm team. They seem like really good guys. So, you know, yeah, I'm pretty confident for that project. I'd like to start seeing them make a little bit more traction, and start to do the sort of stuff that like Spice is doing, and that sort of stuff. But that's not, you know, really a criticism. I just yeah, like I'm excited for the STO industry overall, and I'm really starting to see the dominoes fall. So it's really cool to see that. So, you know, I expect players like Swarm and like Securitize and Securrency and PrefLogic and all these guys to really start making some deals and getting some investors and, you know, that sort of stuff. So it's really cool to see that. You know, it really reminds me of the sort of the startup culture we saw in 2013, and to a lesser degree the ICO culture. But you know, the comparisons will always be made between ICOs and STOs, and you know, people taking advantage of that. And again, it's you will always have that sort of aspect. It's a space that no one truly controls. So, you know, to expect people to always act in, you know, fully I don't know, altruistic manners, you know, you can hope for it, but it's definitely not going to be the case. Yeah, so I read, and I almost wrote a newsletter on this, but I kind of chickened out at the last minute. But yeah, I've always found the idea of kind of secure tokenizing these sort of entertainment type assets, be that sports teams or bands or whatever, to be really interesting, compelling. So, you know, I think, yeah, the first either sports team or stadium or what have you related to sports, I think that's a natural fit for what we're trying to build here. Because, you know, how cool would it be for you to say that I own a piece of my favorite team, or, you know, I own a piece of my my club's stadium or whatever. That would be, that is so cool. It's definitely going to take some more time, I think, before we. Jeez. Well done, PB. But yeah. I don't know. This is still a concept. I think a lot of us, it's still nebulous in nature, and geez, that would be the worst. That would definitely be the worst timeline if the Kardashians are the first ones to be tokenized. Oh man, I can't even. Oh man, you guys are killing me. But yeah, it's I think that's kind of where we are. Is there's not that what I just said, but like overall, I think we're on the right track, and there's a lot of potential, and I swear it's like we just need one good example, one big example of this, and then it will seriously be like an avalanche, because that's how adoption happens, and that's how you prove a new model is to get a high profile case of look at this, look how much cheaper this was, look how much faster this was, and then it just takes a big company or a high profile actor or somebody like that to to push it in that direction, and then it will definitely start to the tide will definitely start to shift. So it's definitely exciting to see. Oh, Cryptomaniac, I didn't answer your question. I'm sorry. Yeah, so V1 was kind of a hybrid of both kind of really rigid coins. We had 4 tiers built in, and thank you, Kryptonite. But credit goes to Checkmate. He wrote that, so he does a great job with the coin analysis stuff. And then V2 of the portfolio, we split it into 2. So we had coins that were only in the top 20, and then we allocated based on that. And then we had a portfolio that was only altcoins, so outside of the top 20, mid and kind of small cap coins. And but put a big disclaimer on it, is like, this is a very risky portfolio. Be very careful. These are 90% of altcoins fail. So even though we do the best we can to try and pick some good ones, it's tough. It's this is a tough space to get it right. But I guess the opportunity is if you get it right just once, it can be life changing. So we definitely saw the allure of that in 2017, and I hope it's my hope that the next time around we're going to see a little bit more measured and just kind of slower growth. A slower bull market would be really just perfect, because I want the market to go up just as much as you guys do, but at the same time, I want it to be something that takes its time and really matures with the space. And again, we also have the sort of X factor of like, what is the overall global market going to do, and how is that going to affect things, or how are we going to be affected by that? And it's there's a lot to take into consideration, but it's also, I think we're in a really opportune space. There's a lot of things to feel auspicious about when it relates to new technology and a new sector and a new industry and new asset class. So PB, the fund is I think once we are a little bit closer with the portfolio, that's I think that's when we can really start to kick things off with that. So I just want to get the portfolio to a place where we all are happy with it, and then it's personally, I'm also like in the middle of moving to California, so like I'm just like so busy right now, like doing all that stuff. So unfortunately, like the next 2 weeks are going to be kind of just I'm going to be on the road and just like living out of hotels while I kind of get all that knocked out. So I apologize that this is like the busiest time of the year for me, just personally. But after that, I'm going to have everything kind of back to being stable, and settled, and I'll have a new apartment and a studio to kind of direct all of this from. So it'll be great, and I'm really excited for where we can take this stuff together, because I think we all have sort of a collective vision, and to act upon it and execute it will be excellent. I think there's so much opportunity for us. SoCal, yeah, LA. So still don't have an apartment lined up. I'm I like to kind of fly by the seat of my pants in that regard. But yeah, well, it'll be okay. And as far as buying non-US credited projects, yeah, I think we can certainly sort of look into that. Oh, okay, yeah. So I still haven't been able to get an answer on that in terms of if non-accredited U.S. investors can participate in a fund or portfolio that takes advantage or invests in projects that require accredited status. My feeling is that there should be a way to do so, but does that mean we have to go through some sort of Reg CF that has to cap the amount that we can raise, or whatever path we have to pursue is going to be my responsibility to find out. But this is, I think this is also kind of this is the opportunity. We ultimately want to build something here that the most amount of people, the maximal amount of people can participate in. And the goal is not really to become this billion-dollar hedge fund or anything like that. Talking to Checkmate, like, if we raise just a couple $1 million, that's great. I think the metric for like a successful fund is like a $2 million raise. If that's all we strive for, that's perfect. I think what we aim to do with the fund is prove that you can do something like this, and that we can make a more egalitarian, more equitable fund that just is more open to all. So it's there's a lot of questions to still answer, and I want to make sure we go about it in the best way possible. So I hate to keep kicking the can down the road, but we fully intended to do this. So it's it's definitely on my mind for sure.
Hey, Mav.
Hey.
Hey,
Oh,
sorry. Did you guys start this thing a bit early?
did we?
Yeah, I think it's an hour early.
Oh. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, guys.
That's all right. I'm
So
impressed. There's so many people who've jumped on at short notice.
yeah. So yeah, we have this really dumb thing in the U.S. Called daylight savings, and so today was that. I totally didn't even think about that. Um,
Yeah, don't worry. We do daylight savings everywhere. I don't know why the UK does it, because they don't get sunlight half of the year anyway.
That's so true. Yeah, okay. That would explain why people were kind of trickling in. I was like, oh wow, this is not a very not a good day, I suppose. But
Bloody right.
my apologies, guys. I didn't even realize that. That's really funny. Um, hey, I gotta go grab my charger really quick. Do you want to answer Link's question here with
Yeah,
regards
sure.
to like how if we're gonna start to I think part of how we evaluate and allocate something to the portfolio is based off of the fundamental analysis, and a
Yep.
big piece of that is having a checklist in place. So some of these common metrics that we can look at and say, yep, we can basically blend or process a project into our little checklist, or go through the 10 points or whatever to say, yep, based on this is a 7 out of 10 project, or what have you. And just kind of have common metrics in place to evaluate them against each other.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this is it'll differ depending on which avenue we end up looking at. So, to be honest, as I kind of build up these coin spotlight reports, I'm slowly developing a checklist at the very least in my mind. And I think it's one of those things that, I'd love to get something out there for everybody to kind of have a look at, get a feel for. What we really need to try and get the balance right for is there's going to be different metrics for security tokens. There's going to be different metrics for crypto tokens, and one of the things I'm looking into is I really want to understand some of these metrics that the guys use to map out the Bitcoin network, because it is basically the fundamentals of the Bitcoin company, if you want to call it that. So the crypto networks will have their own type of things, and a lot of these are going to be consistent. And then DeFi will have its own kind of metrics. But I think for most people, they're going to be most familiar with crypto projects and securities, depending on which side of the fence you've kind of come from. So I've initially started building some, not quite a checklist, but certainly some questions that you should be asking if you were to do a full detailed analysis of a security token project. So that was similar to what we did for PrefLogic. And the reason that that particular project has so much rigor behind it, and why I kind of went down the route of doing, all right, if you were to do full scale due diligence on a company, this is kind of what it would look like, is because for security tokens, for actual security tokens, they tend to have a, unlike ones that are trading on OFN or otherwise, a lot of these things have $5,000-$10,000 minimum buy-ins, which is unfortunate because it does leave a lot of people behind, but it is also kind of the space we're in. So the reason that I looked at that for PrefLogic is because it did have it, I think it was 2,500 minimum buy-in, and that's why that level of detail exists for something like that. Now, if you're looking to invest somewhere, a couple of hundred here and there, then you can certainly wind back that level of detail. And what you really need to do is understand where it sits in your portfolio in terms of which category it's in. There's elements of your risk tolerance. But yes, I think in terms of a checklist, I'm slowly building something in my mind, which I'd love to get people's comments and thoughts on. What we really need is, I think, the most important is a preliminary screening checklist, something that you can immediately look at a project's website, look at their white paper or whatever other documentations out there, and basically make a fairly confident snap judgment that you do or do not want to keep looking into this project. One thing I found today, I think, Matt, you've already gone through some of the work I did on Flow today. One of the things that just shocks me about Flow is, as soon as you dig anywhere underneath the surface, you find that there's really no development. The website hasn't changed since 2015. There's a lot of red flags that immediately pop up and go, hang on a second, something doesn't feel right here. So you almost need that immediate checklist where you say, something just isn't right here, and I either want to find out more, which for Flow, I really did want to find out more because I want to understand what T0 is doing. But a lot of projects, if I was to find Flow and they did not have T0 on the radar, they would have about half hour of my attention, and then I'm out. So I think that immediate screening checklist is really, really important. I think as a group, what I see in the chatter in this space is we're actually all pretty good at picking projects and weeding out a lot of the garbage. We're actually pretty much there. I think we almost do that as a cohesive unit. So I'd actually like to get everybody's input on that. So I might draft up a preliminary screening checklist, but it'd be good to get everybody's feedback on that and what you think the real key elements are for a security token, for a crypto project, to basically not look at it any further. You then have the next phase, which is, okay, we're going to look into this project further, and it could be as simple as 10 questions that we really need to answer. And once it ticks off enough of those points, then we can basically say, all right, guys, let's, as a team, as a crowd, let's really look into this in more detail. So, yeah, I think it's definitely something we should do forward. I think once we have something that's relatively consistent and everybody kind of understands, and it's the level of detail that makes it digestible for everybody to really get involved in, I think there'd be a great method in just, whether we crowdsource or stick a big table and people just put their ratings for the different components. You take a law of averages, and if you average across enough people, chances are you'll be pretty close to the truth. So I think that'll be a interesting and fun little exercise.
Yeah, that's actually really. I like that idea a lot. I think together we definitely have just sort of a collective intelligence as it relates to sniffing things out and just understanding things at a higher level. And certainly when it comes to building something like a collective portfolio, for example, having that and utilizing that is going to be our best path forward.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Saving time is critically important. And it's one of those things that the more and more you do this, the faster you'll get at sniffing out something and going, something's not right here. you'll develop a bit of a, call it a VC's intuition. So I think that's really where we want to get everybody to, is to a point where you kind of have that intuition, and then you know what the next steps are. And look, the other thing we can also develop, and again, something I've kind of got in the back of my mind, is where I go looking for information. I'd love to have kind of a database of who are the best podcast people listening to, who are the best people on Twitter that you're following, and starting to build a bit of a database of these people who are really calling the shots with the rigor behind it, but also the foresight. So, I'm arguably not following anybody on Twitter who says when moon, but I'm definitely following people on Twitter who are talking about genuine fundamental metrics about things and where the industry is going. So I'd love to build up a bit of a database of who everybody is kind of following. And again, it's one of those things where you almost just stick it in a spreadsheet, one line per thing, and you almost, everybody just assigns himself a column, and you just put a rating or a number or crossing things off. And you almost just take an average. How many people follow this? How many people like this particular element of a project? I don't know what the best format to do it is, but I just know that when you take an average of a crowd, you normally get pretty close to the truth. So the more we work together, the closer we're going to get to that.
Yeah, it also really helps with just kind of amassing information on projects. So, even just Checkmate and I talking about flow, we were able to find basically every relevant piece of information on the internet. There wasn't much of it, but it also really helps to be able to go through online forums and do sort of an evaluation of evaluations and say, what are people talking about as it relates to this project, or the people behind it, or is there something I can glean from the information that's out there? And a lot of times there's not much of it, so you have to kind of make a determination and just have a preponderance of evidence to say yes or no. Is this a project worth pursuing? Is this a project worth investing in? Certainly, it's a question we ask in crypto a lot. And even then, even when you start to look into something and you think, okay, this is really good, something can really come out of left field. Up until this point, I really was pretty convinced that tZero was something to champion and be excited about. And while I'm not going to totally discredit them, I am going to call into question sort of a reverberation of their fundamental analysis to say, why are they building off of for all intents and purposes, a old dead coin? Maybe not dead, but certainly
number 300.
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't 300 until they mentioned something.
Right. Yeah. It raises a lot of questions. And then, as I mentioned earlier in this call, it was, what really strikes me is how there is redacted information. They've tried to, either skate around answering questions on that regard, or, they've removed answers regarding their building off of flow. That just tells me that there's ulterior motives here that I want to know more about. So yeah, again, we don't have to get into specific examples here, but these are the sort of questions. This is the sort of level that we need to play by in order to take this to sort of a higher level.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I went into the research really trying to find out what their motive was and really why they've opted for it. What is it that I haven't looked into? What is it that I've missed? And I just couldn't find it. And the more and more I dug, the less and less I found that was exciting me. And where I would actually like to go with the next step with this is to find out exactly, because I know there's Raven coins in the mix somewhere. Where is the money of these people actually flowing to? Because I can't help but have this feeling that if anything was to happen to tZero, let's say this thing launched and flow fell by the wayside or whatever happens, that's going to put a huge dent in the industry, and that's an existential risk that we can't ignore. So if we imagine that tZero does proceed down this path, sticks with flow, and they have a 51% attack, that's game over for a long time for the security tokens. That's going to put a huge dent in the reputation. And I'll tell you what, there are no institutions that would want to touch this space if that happened for a good number of years. So something that we need to be aware of and conscious of, because some of these black swan events could just be what happens. So I think keeping a pulse on what's the good and the bad is really quite important.
Yeah, I think about the Quadraga. I don't know how to pronounce it. That exchange where the CEO died, and there's all these questions about what happened to the funds and all that sort of stuff. I don't know anyone personally that used that exchange, but yet it reflected poorly on the entire space, and that's unfortunate because there is still this perception that this space, this industry is nascent, or it's filled with scammers, or anything like that. And we're in a critical time where we need to transition and prove that we have legitimacy and that we're here to disrupt and improve and evolve things. And it's going to be a lot harder if big actors like T0 somehow, I don't know, I wouldn't say mess it up or somehow, but it's definitely, we need to hold people accountable, because we're all in this collectively, whether we like it or not. It's yeah, I also think back to BitConnect and what that did to the industry, and it was both good and bad that they went under, but at the same time, a lot of people got hurt with that, and a lot of people lost faith in crypto because of a platform that was clearly scamming people. It's an unfortunate state of affairs, but that's just, again, I talked about this earlier in the call. It was like no one directly owns the space, so we all have to own it, and that's a charter I don't think we're used to.
Yeah, and this is the really exciting thing to me about distributed networks is you have these people who can go in there and analyze the blockchain and actually look at where things have occurred. You've got people who've gone in there and identified that there's 30,000 missing Ripple blocks. You've got people who've found Bitcoin private who had a pre-mine that nobody really noticed until the coin started moving. We're in this really interesting space where there's a lot of clever minds out there, and really, you can analyze these things and you can actually identify where there's foul play. So, and this really trying to find the people who are doing this work is critically important because it helps us keep our eyes on the ground without having to crunch those level of numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's both PBE and VN Delta here are kind of talking about we do have an opportunity, but at the same time there's going to be a lot of opportunities, and I hope I hope we can impress that it's important that we do the best we can to seize opportunities and get in front of things, but there's going to be things that we can't anticipate or capture, or it's okay. It's okay to miss opportunities. It's okay to let things slide, because ultimately we're in a very risky and experimental space, and caution is definitely the best thing to exercise by. So that's definitely something I want to make sure we we're not going to be here to do any sort of moon missions or pumps or anything like that. We're here to chase the real long-term growth and do the best we can to seize the long-term opportunity. As I was talking about earlier, we also would like to have some space for swing trading and things of that sort, and I think there's space and opportunity for both. But yeah, we don't want to conflate the two.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've certainly learned over the course of my time is you can have two separate buckets, and if you're investing in something with a 5-10 year time horizon, then buy it off an exchange or wherever you're getting it and stick it in a cold wallet. If you're doing swing trades, have an allotted amount of money that you actually play with to do that. So actually segmenting your funds and your time scales is really quite important, because there's no point entering the STO space if you've got a year long time horizon. I think you'd be lucky if you get 30%. If you bought Spice back when it was $1, you could sell it today for $1.60 and take 60%. That's a fantastic move. But what happens when that thing moves in 5 years' time? And it could very well sit there at $1, $2 for the next 3 years, 4 years. And next thing you know, it could just pop once the industry and regulators all finally get that infrastructure and that faith and that confidence that this has actually got merit. it really is a long-term play. And this is why I think following and keeping touch with the VCs is really, really critical, because those guys, they're professionals. This is what they do. They're out there taking the big swings, and, they'll have plenty of misses, but when they land them, they really are the 1000x on equity, which is remarkable when it happens. So I think following the VCs and seeing what they're doing, particularly given that tokenizing a VC fund is really where I think the opportunity is going to be for the retail investor, because you can get exposure to a whole basket of things as opposed to taking risk on one platform. You're taking risk across a basket of things that are in a related industry, but really capturing a good spread of projects and spread of risk, really. So I think following VCs is a key part of our charter.
I think that's also a good point too. Kind of in the opposite regard, with T0, where a month ago I would have told you that was the one of the best investments you could make in the space, and maybe it still is. But we've watched it go from what was it, $10 to $3 over the past couple of weeks, or
right?
Since its launch.
Where do you watch the price?
Or someone was talking about the price earlier, I thought.
Yeah, I've actually not seen it, but I do need to look into that. That's quite interesting that people are trying to get out so quickly.
Yeah, maybe I'm making that up. I don't know. But let's say that was the case. There's no such thing as a defined, like set in stone is going to happen sort of thing, especially in this space. You have to be ready to be upset, or for things to not work out perfectly, and that's okay. That's why we diversify. That's why we try to mitigate risk where we can. And yes, like Checkmate said, we just have to operate like VCs. You cannot play with emotions in this space. You cannot take things solely at face value. You have to look under the surface and really dig through things, and just try to remove emotions from the equation and do the best you can. So I think we're right here in the early stages of setting up what I would love to see in terms of a VC fund, or just a investment fund, and really take this to new heights, and really just make something very special happen. But yeah, it takes time, and it takes deliberate consideration to make sure that we just get it right, because it's you don't want to mess around. You don't want to leave people hanging, but at the same time, you gotta make sure that we're all on the same page. So I think this is something that we can build together. I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, so I think something I'd really be keen to open up to the floor is, if we were looking at a split here. So I know there's people in the US are obviously going to have a preference towards projects that are geared towards security tokens that are already in the crypto sphere, because they're actually accessible. Hi, Crypto. No, yeah, we've got it mixed up because of daylight savings. So
it's my fault. They play the recordings here, so right after this call, you can go back and listen to the first half where I just sort of rambled on for 30 minutes. It's really not that impressive.
Yeah. But yeah, I think what I'd really like to get a bit of an idea from the floor is how accessible. I mean, I found that with getting into security token infrastructure equity, which is a bit of a mouthful, but the likes of Harbor and Spice VC and Pref Logic, they tend to have a fairly large buy-in, and I know that a lot of people in this forum have trouble actually getting into that, whether it be for accreditation or otherwise. So what I'd really be keen to get a bit of a feel from people is, what are the opportunities that you've kind of seen? How I really want to be focusing our research, because when Mav and I go for a deep dive and try to really understand a project, we really want to be picking projects that are going to provide the biggest value for you guys. There's a whole other category of projects that we can kind of sweep through and do a faster check on. So I think I'd definitely love to see some conversation and questions, and even recommendations come through of which projects are on your radar, which ones are really something that you're actually really excited about, and which ones you've kind of screened through and feel like there's a bit more due diligence. But and almost categorizing them into ones that are floating out there in the equity / VC space and ones that are in the crypto token, smart land, swarm type projects. So, as the next couple of weeks go on, mull it over, and I'd be definitely keen to hear which of those kind of baskets and things you guys are all looking at, and arguably are really keen to understand more about.
And one point that I want to make sure I make, just as a little tangent here, when we're getting started in the space, when we're starting to just trying to figure this stuff out and trying to navigate sort of the complex world of securities and how to get involved in this and the difference between accredited and non-accredited and what the different SEC exemptions are and all this sort of stuff. It seems like it's very complicated, or it's hard to navigate. But really, what you're doing, especially if you haven't been involved in this stuff before, is you're teaching yourself how to navigate the private equity space, which is much more complicated than the public equity space. But there's also a lot of opportunities, both in crypto, in STO, and outside of it. And so this is really giving you a lot of tools and expertise, where I feel that there's going to be a large push towards in the coming future with regard to investment and just the overall investor preferences, and certainly the companies who are looking to say, is it worth going public anymore? Is it worth trading on public markets? In some cases, yes, but the IPO has really fallen out of favor as of late. And so there's been a push towards private equity, and certainly with tokenization, certainly with STOs coming online and on the scene, there's going to be even more of a push towards private equity and private ownership. It's this is the beginning of where I see a large shift occurring. So just giving yourself the tools to navigate that space is putting you far ahead of many other people and investors, and it's just you're in a very good position.
Yeah, I mean, probably just address Fabian's question here. If we could jointly invest in a number of VC funds, that's certainly something that we're looking at. But as I'm sure you can appreciate, the logistics of how we actually set that up. There's legal elements and financial elements and all that. So that's definitely something we're assessing. I think in the meantime, while we kind of debug that whole process and wrap our heads around it, we definitely want to be identifying. I think we're in a point in time where I think we can safely say that there's at least a year, 2 years before these things really start to move. So we have the time to build the foundation and kind of see where all the landmines are in this space. And I think if we can identify, get our process right, get our systems right, get our metrics right, when the major opportunities come and institutions start walking and start actually stepping into this space, we'll be ready. And the idea is that we would have something that is capable of doing some kind of joint or a fund or a portfolio or something that we can really get everybody on board with. But I think at the moment, that's the education side of things and trying to identify the opportunities is really where we're at. We're in that foundation stage. We're in that really, really early part of this industry. And when you look at some of the telegrams of actual security token projects, and you realize that you're like the 2000th person to actually sign up, that's pretty indicative. We saw recently the Spice VC Open Finance Network. The whole order book just got cleared. There's no one left. Everybody who knows about this thing has already bought or sold. So we are so early in this space. It's the right time to get our foundations right.
And also, Fabian, I think it's completely possible to do so. You see, like CityBlock is invested in, is it Spice? I don't know. I have to look at that again. But yeah, it would be fully my intention to see us allocate a portion of the investment to these other tokenized VC funds. I think that's just a smart move to kind of hedge the bets that we're making. So entertaining an investment in Spice or BCAP or CityBlock or 22X, that's I think that's a no-brainer in terms of you just kind of spreading out your exposure and also getting yourself into, really just what they're doing. But at the same time, there's merit in just building up a portfolio of fund that is strictly, other projects that we want to invest in. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity to have multiple baskets, or different funds for different purposes. It's really, I think it's there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of different ways we can approach this. Do we kind of only invest in projects that don't have a token, or is the opposite true, or do we mix them together? Things like that. Those are the sort of questions I want to be asking, and having definitive answers to, and starting to really get this in order, because I think there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot. I don't know. I just get really excited thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, PB, I think you raise a good point there about utility offering hype. I think that is genuine. And I was just actually mulling this over before. The coin price for a utility token, a Swarm or a Smart Land, yes, I agree that they will be subject to retail level hype. And that's obviously something that there's arguably, long hold or swing trade opportunities on. If they were to still launch a security token, however, that doesn't mean that security token can't operate on a security tokens exchange. So these projects can still create compliant and regulatory acceptable tokens that can trade to institutions. But the actual project themselves is, I still feel it's unlikely that institutions and these large parties, until they start buying Bitcoin, I think the chance of them buying Smart Lands and Swarm is extremely low. But it doesn't mean that the company is not going to be creating security tokens, which in theory should, if the tokenomics is right, elevate the price of that coin. I think the difference will be that they will have access, that token will be able to be bought and the price moved by retail rather than institutions, at least in the short term. So the more I think about it, I think there's still a lot of opportunities there, because they still have the ability to create genuine security tokens that can trade on security tokens exchange. It just is unlikely that an institution will be able to buy a Swarm token. So, I think there's a hype wave to operate there, and it's something we can certainly keep track of. And what's interesting, you mentioned about decentralization. That's what I found interesting about Flow is when, yes, you can have decentralization. I'm not sure how many computers in the world are running coin number 300, probably more since T0 came in. But with Ravencoin, on the other hand, my understanding is that does actually have fairly widespread decentralization. It's running on GPUs all over the place. So I think that element of decentralization is really, really important, because if you don't need decentralization, you don't need a blockchain. If you don't need the security that having the ledger copied in 50,000 locations gives you, then you don't need a blockchain. You need an IBM server. So there is no reason for a centralized. This is what confuses me a little bit about Ripple. Is you can do that with a faster computer. I don't fully understand what their value proposition is. Whereas if you've got something like an Ethereum, which is completely decentralized, you can have that security element and you can trade tokens without the middleman. So I think the element of decentralization is really, really important, because there's just no real reason to be in this industry if that's not the ultimate goal. And projects that don't express that as a value proposition, we need to understand why they don't value that and what the actual benefits of that are. And are they just a private blockchain that has, if they're not interoperable, they could just disappear. So keeping those things in mind is important.
Yeah, and then related to the question about if Flow and T0 are still a buy, I think there's, even though I'm critical of what's been going on with T0 building off of Flow, I don't know if that necessarily counts them out of being under consideration. They still are, backed by hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's clearly where Overstock is pivoting to. So there's still a lot going for it, but at the end of the day, they are still a security token exchange in an industry where there aren't many security tokens trading. So there's still, I think they're burning through $2 million a month right now, and there's still a lot of questions. So if they can pull it off, sure, I think there's a lot of reason to like them long term, but yeah, I would say it's going to take some time for them to really be profitable, for them to really attract the level of trading that they need to justify that level of cash burn. And yeah, it's while they're doing something like that, you've got other exchanges like Open Finance clearly proving that they can operate and winning uh, you know people's affection. So I don't know. It's clearly a horse race right now, and I also wonder what will happen once you get institutions, legacy institutions, on board, and you get guys like Fidelity and TD Ameritrade to start entering the game, and they bring their own exchange solutions. I think, as it relates to the future, at least for the next 5 years or so, that those sort of institutions, that's what they do best. The guys that run, the New York Stock Exchange and the Nasdaq and are, running brokerages and things like that. That is their game, and they're going to come in here and they're going to do exactly what they do already. They've got the money and the power and the liquidity to do so. So they're definitely going to win on the exchange game. They're going to be a dominant force. Where I think the startups will do well is in the issuance and understanding how to communicate with blockchain platforms like Ethereum or Flow or whatever. That is where we can see something a little bit more, startup friendly, and that's where we can see something a little bit more friendly to our purposes, as it relates to building a fund and getting in early and maximizing capital investment. That's I think the exciting part. And yes, PP, the unfortunate nature of the security token space is that it is a centralized or pseudo centralized space, and that's why I have to make the distinction between the security token space and the blockchain space, or crypto rather, is that they have two very different ideals, even if they're operating with similar technology. Security tokens, securities in general are centralized, and you're not gonna change that because that's in their nature. They have to be, and that's okay. We can introduce the efficiencies of the blockchain to something, and make it less centralized, more efficient. And like I said earlier, true decentralization is a privilege. It's something that takes a lot of effort to obtain and maintain. And for the next conceivable decade or several decades, I think we're going to see a lot of these hybrid solutions like security tokens that introduce the best elements of both centralization and decentralization into one common application or enterprise or what have you. And that's going to be the the game moving forward, and I'm okay with it. I think that's a good place to start. If you want to convert or evolve something, you've got to take baby steps like this. You've got to slowly move into it, and that will take time and effort, and just convincing people. But that's how we do it, and I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, and I think the thing to keep in mind is that the traditional institutions, the investment banks and the like, their industry is taking fees. Their
Yeah.
industry is being middlemen, and you
Yep.
can be pretty sure they're not going to just walk away from arguably the biggest business in the world. So there will be a degree of centralization, no question. I think where the real value comes from is when you start making offerings of stocks and shares to a global audience. Once you actually expand the reach, which is really what the ICO proves, is you can have people from every corner of the world investing into a single project. Once the investment banks realize that that is actually the true opportunity, and sorry, even if the investment banks don't realize it, it's more likely to occur than not because it's just a really good idea. and it enables so many people, and enables capital formation in a way that's never been done before. So whether the investment banks like it or not, it's going to end up in a decentralized system in the end. They may start with some baby steps in centralized formats where it's kind of like having a LAN network in the early days of the internet, but eventually you realize that the huge benefit is by turning outwards and actually looking to a wider audience and having that global reach and global finance. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that we will probably see. We're not going to see these guys just walk away from their business. They're going to do everything they can to get involved, and this is why you'll see them buying. Most likely, they'll end up buying the likes of Harbour and Securitize and PrefLogic. That's probably where that's all going to go. And a lot of those guys know that that's their exit. Their exit is they're going to build a platform that the investment banks are going to be too slow to build, and when the hype finally kicks in, they're going to go and just buy an issuance platform because it's easier to just incorporate them into their business. So that's the most likely outcome to happen, I think. But the global reach does need. It's unlikely we're going to have an international bank that is the middleman that all the transactions are routed through. It's more likely that it's going to exist on a decentralized system that now allows that to happen once that baby step towards semi-centralized and then more decentralized and then fully decentralized. So there'll be an unwrapping process, I think, over the long term. And just throwing something in there back to the question about T0 and Flow, I think my read on this is if I see something come out from T0 / Flow that really just completely unbunks everything that we've kind of uncovered, and it's transparent and actually gives us an idea why that decision has been made, then happy to change our perspective. At the moment, Flow looks unimpressive for what it's offering. So I would not necessarily argue that it's a no-go. I would say that I'm cautious of what Flow is offering, and I'm thus skeptical of why T0 has chosen them until I find out otherwise. Now, there's no reason that T0 won't pivot and just say, well, guess what? We've now moved on to this platform, and they will change their tact. If there's anything wrong with Flow, a company of that size is going to eventually work it out, and they'll probably, that could be part of their long-term plan anyway. So I'm more skeptical of what's going on with Flow. I'm, by association, a little bit skeptical of what's going on with T0, but by no means would we write these things off, because you have to be agile. And this is I think this is one of the key metrics. If we're going to have a series of metrics, one of the key things is, are you future-proof? Because I can guarantee you that the space will look different in 6 months' time, and it'll look even more different in 2 years. So if you're not ready to actually pivot and change the blockchain, in fact, being blockchain agnostic is probably not a bad idea, but having the infrastructure to change in a changing industry is arguably one of the highest priority items for assessing some of these companies. So if I get a little bit more information that really justifies why they picked Flow, I'll happily change the perspective. Until I see that, I'll be watching to see what T0 does, because based on what I saw in the development timeline, Flow hasn't done much in a little while, so I'm not expecting that to change.
I also think it's really interesting to kind of use this as a case study of like how I anticipate larger institutions to react or try to adopt blockchain and build up on it. Because if they perceive that by using an open public blockchain as big as Ethereum is a threat or somehow compromises their business model, and they would rather build off of a small, mostly dead project like Flow, what does that say when other institutions want to get in and build up their own exchange or what have you? It's going to be. I think there's going to be questions that come out of this. I don't know. It's yeah, like Checkmate said, it's really just we in this space like to have transparency, and clearly there's ulterior motives here that we'd like to know more about. But yeah, for it to be shooting up right now, I would be very cautious of that. Definitely don't chase after pumps, especially on very old, very small small projects that have suspect volume.
Yeah, and the truth is, I actually had a swing trade on Flow recently, and I closed my position simply because the liquidity was so poor that if anything changed in the market, it just wasn't worth sitting money in the thing. That was a pure technical trade, and the liquidity is so poor that it wasn't worth sticking around for. But what I found amazing is I found articles and even videos of people this is a review of Flow, and they said, yeah, well, look, the news is the T0's picked them, so Flow must be really good, and that was literally the extent of their due diligence. Which as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, that sounds like a scam. There's got to be something wrong with it. So that's where I ended up looking deeper, and most people don't do their research. The majority of people, and even after this whole episode with the ICO, I can guarantee you that there's probably going to be a very small selection of people, most of them sitting in this forum, who actually know how to do research at the end of this bear market. Most people will not change their tactic, and they'll do exactly as Doc says, which they'll hope for a different outcome, which is the onset of insanity. They'll do exactly the same thing and get the same result. Always be skeptical.
And I think it also this also highlights, just for the short term, I think Fabian is right on the money in terms of, we will see these recurring pumps or jumps on STO projects or STO protocol layers that are tokenized or tradable as a token for the short term, and that's just going to be the nature of things. Is for those people who can't get into something like Spice or T0 or whatever. This is what they're going to probably be chasing after, even if there's not a lot of fundamentals there, or there really isn't. I don't think there's a huge distinguishing factor between Swarm or Own or Smartlands. I think they're all okay projects, but I clearly don't see one being just far superior than the other. It's going to be a horse race for some time, because until one of these projects clearly starts to take the lead and starts to get a lot of issuers on their platform, and does a really good job of pushing the space forward, and just really is a market leader in both thought and execution. It's just going to be we're going to see just people getting kind of tribalistic and saying, no, Smartlands is the best, no, Own is the best, no, Swarm is the best, and it's going to be like that for some time. But that's just indicative of where things are right now. Yeah, checkmate pumped Flow.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, every time I seem to put out an article, and I swear it's got nothing to do with me, these coins seem to start moving. I think Maker started ripping to the upside as soon as I published the thing. I have nothing to do with it. I wish I did.
You got the magic touch. Yeah, I've had that with my videos too. It's like I was talking about earlier. Like, I put out that video this week, and Binance Coin was the first one I mentioned, and I had no real intention of seeing it do any sort of pump. But within 2 hours of my video, it just went like 15% or something like that. It was just insane. So yeah, whoops. It wasn't me though. It was their announcement about their decentralized exchange. But hey, that's it's a coincidence. It's a conspiracy. Yeah, Ian Bellina effect.
Good luck.
What's that?
Is Ian Bellina still around?
Oh, the Shalina. Perhaps I shouldn't talk.
Watching one of his what did he do? He did like a conference presentation, and he was talking about how 2018 is going to be the year of the ICO metrics. I don't know how that played out.
Yeah, it's I'll be interested to see. Hopefully this next time around, this next bull market, or resurgence or capitulation or whatever, everything that everybody's hoping for. When the market does start to really get itself out of the funk, and we start to see just some excitement come back to crypto, and things start to heat up again, and it'll be great. But I'll be interested to see kind of how the dynamics of sort of the entertainer space, if you will, the YouTubers, the Twitter, Instagram, etc. Just how they'll be different this time around. I hope it's going to be something a little bit more substantial, and people are a little less trusting of guys with YouTube channels and things of that sort. It's yeah, I think it was unfortunate, just the state of things in 2017, and I hope some we've sort of learned our collective lesson. But I am also a little bit cynical in that regard. There's always going to be people like Ian Bellina who capitalize on people's sort of inhibitions, and that's unfortunate. But we do the best we can to just try to push for a higher narrative, a more intelligent investor base, and just do the due diligence. And it's tough, but it's the right thing to do. Yeah, the halving. Yeah, that will be interesting. So,
I mean, that's the halving is my weather vane, because that is Bitcoin's primary fundamental purpose: is money, limited supply, stock to flow ratio goes up. That's, to me, the halving is the thing that anybody who knows anything about Bitcoin and understands what it's trying to do, that's going to be the event. So if it's not moving by then I'd be getting out.
Yeah, and it might even just be at least at first, might be a self-fulfilling prophecy of people know that that's coming, so they're going to move or trade or mine or whatever in response to it, and it'll be interesting. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's going to be some activity in regards to that. Oh yeah, and then Daniel, you're absolutely right. It's I don't know. I've seen a lot of YouTubers be really skeptical, even just at a face value kind of thing, where they just say, "Oh, STOs, oh that's that's just ICOs 2.0, or it's a playground for the rich or whatever." Yeah, I always say this. It's just really disappointing to see people who are like so accepting of crypto, which is this very conceptual, experimental, startup space, and to see them just kind of turn around and say, "Oh no, STOs, not for me. That's too crazy." I don't know.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah. I don't know. So yeah, it will be kind of funny if they start to do an about face, but I don't know. I only know one or two other YouTubers that I've talked to that have been really kind of open to it. Brad Laurie and Crypto Gurus, and we even formed our own little Telegram group where we kind of share some articles and stuff, and we're the crypto STO guys, or the YouTube STO guys. We have to stick together. Yeah, not that we're forming some sort of cabal or secret pact or anything like that, but yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, we're definitely in a
on the ground, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, I didn't know about that. Oh geez, yeah.
Still doing hour-long videos talking about them?
I don't know. I don't get me started on him. I have opinions. uh, oh man. Yeah. He's he's a mini CNBC, if you will, or I don't know. Yep. Oh geez. All right. Cool. Well, I think we've had a pretty good call here. And now that we're starting to talk about Superman, it's probably a time to cut things off.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, I think we made some good progress today in terms of, again, we have to collectively just kind of have an understanding as it relates to how we're going to move forward with this, evaluation process and the metrics we're going to use. So, yeah, I think the sort of idea of having just a weighted average of people's evaluations is a really good idea, and I'd like to put that into practice here pretty quickly, so that we can start to just have a database of that, and we can start to collect our research and our evaluations, and just have that as our starting point. And yeah, I think that's also a really good segue into how we're going to build this portfolio together. I've been getting a lot of emails from people saying, where's portfolio version 3? What's going on with the portfolio? And I think the answer there is, I'd like this next portfolio iteration to be something that is collectively owned and collectively built. In the past, I've done the best I can to architect a portfolio that I felt people would do well with and, derive a lot of value from. And, I could certainly do that again, but I think there's so much more value if we go out there and build this together and update it and manage it together. And that way there's just many more eyes on it and many more voices taken into consideration. And just, I think there's a lot we can do with that. And by extension, we can use that to start the fire of the fund and really start to, ask the questions that we need to ask and start to, build the sort of pieces that we need to. And it's, I think this is a really good iterative process and, sort of a snowball, if you will. It's very exciting stuff. So I know that the STO space and just the current crypto market it's warming up, which is cool. I really like that. But yeah, it's still got some it still has a lot to do and a lot very far to go. And we definitely are. It's going to take some time, but that's our opportunity. And hopefully, as you guys get more involved in this, and as we start to really turn things up a notch here, it's going to get a little bit more fun here. So thank you for sticking around. And Checkmate, do you have any final thoughts?
No, look, I think I guess my only kind of call to action is I'd be really keen to get involved in discussions with whoever is in the chat room over the course of the next week about what projects you're really looking at, what kind of things you're looking for in a portfolio. I'd love to just have some chatter and some banter about what you guys want to achieve, because that will help Mav and I really target what we do our deep dives on and what tools and things we can start to build from the ground up, what tools we can build to really equip everybody as best we can. So, whether you want to talk about a particular project, whether there's a particular type of project that you're really interested in, even if you just want to have a discussion about what is exciting you in this space or what you don't understand, I think getting some engaging conversations going, and I'm increasingly seeing that we're all answering each other's questions, which is just awesome. I think that's really where we want to get to. So if my call to action this week is really to get everybody motivated to have conversation about what you want to do, what you want to see built, and what you want to get involved in building. What are the projects that are on your radar? Some of that kind of stuff. I think that'd be really great to kind of get a feel for what's out there, where everybody in the room is at, so we can really build and create the maximum value for you guys as the weeks go on.
And I think that's a really, really good collective thought exercise of how do you guys approach the sort of question of, what is your risk exposure? Would you prefer more risky projects or, an allocation that is inherently more risky over something that's a little bit more conservative? And how, again, as I was talking about earlier, we've got the three pillars of crypto, STO, and DeFi. How are we going to split the portfolio up in those three pieces? Is it going to be something that's weighted a little bit more towards crypto, with STOs taking up 10%, for example, of the overall portfolio? Or do we take a little bit more chance and say, yeah, we should really up that to 15% or whatever? There's a lot of questions that we need to answer, and it's really the only way we can answer them is to talk amongst each other and say, okay, what are we feeling with regard to even just looking at the crypto pillar? How do we invest in something like that? Do we just stick to the top 10? Do we stick to certain industries or subgenres of crypto? There's a lot to cover here. And it really can only be done through discourse in this community. And yeah, that's again why I don't want to be the one to tell people to say, yes, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to come down in my authoritarian sense and say, this is how we're going to do it. I'd much rather us kind of collectively come to a place together and say, yeah, I think this is a really good compromise, or really just a collective vision that, oh yeah, okay, poll would be actually a really good idea. Yeah, so we can either do this in a survey format or just a strict poll or what have you. But just starting to get some of your thoughts. And I think this group, the people listening to this call, and then by extension the people listening to the recording, we've got a lot of really good, smart people here, and I think together we can really create something that we're going to all be very proud of and all benefit from, because this stuff doesn't go anywhere per se. You do the due diligence on a project, or you take the time to learn about the inner processes of security law and all this sort of stuff. That doesn't go anywhere. We're definitely going to see this become more and more relevant. So
lifelong skills.
Yeah, exactly. So we can do this together, and we can build something together that we're going to all take something from. So hopefully that's I think a good charter. And let's start just hammering this away this week. Yes, yeah, that's I kind of on the fly, Simondo. I did think that, like, yes, a poll would be good, but I think a survey would allow the flexibility. And I'm going to make sure that whatever way we decide to use the survey, that people can see other people's responses, because I don't want this to be like in a vacuum, and then we like decide by committee what we're going to do. I want us to be able to see what other people are saying, and how people are responding to things. And you might see what someone else is saying and say, like, oh, that's really interesting, or, well, I don't know if I agree with that, but let me see what that person, how they're coming from. And that is the sort of discourse we need to have, because it's when you've got a portfolio and you've got $100,000 to allocate it, or $10,000 or $100, what you do with that and how you do that. I think that's ultimately where we ask these sort of hard questions of, how do we want to do that? And how best are we going to go about diversifying this in a way that I think tries to make, I don't know, tries to appeal to the most voices at once. So it's a very tough thing.
End up with 3 different risk allocations. True.
So I think that's a really good place to start or finish for today. So anything else? Alrighty, well, cool. Well then, again, thank you so much for sticking around with us, and I'm sorry for getting started a little bit early. We'll be on time next week, but the recording will be out right after this, and I'll get the render started on the YouTube video. So thanks for sticking around, guys, and have a great rest of your weekend or start of your week. And we'll talk soon.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right. Cheers.